Good afternoon. Happy July 23rd, 2020. Welcome to the 16th edition of On the Menu. Our guest today is none other than Mr. G.B. Oliver. G.B., how are you? How's vacation?
Aloha, Bob. Doing great.
I see that you'll have to 14-day quarantine when you get home.
I don't know why I would have to. Randy Raymond doesn't.
Well, that's true. Okay, G.B., I know that you're from this area. You have a lot of family history, probably a lot of it I don't even know about. I know a little bit about the ranching heritage in your family. Tell us a little bit about your family and how long they've been here and a little bit about how you were raised, and go from there.
Be glad to, Bob. I'll tell you the parts that I want to tell you. There are parts of it that should be left out, I think. My family came into this area in the late 1890s. Started a mercantile store here in Alamogordo. Was the only mercantile store in Alamogordo. Ultimately bought a ranch about 25 miles to the southwest of Alamogordo. That's where I was born and raised, on that ranch. I always felt like that was a great beginning. I don't think anybody ever had better role models. The ranch had about 186,000 acres on it, which sounds huge, except for when you consider how many cattle per acre it takes to run a cow out there. You know, we had about 10 inches of rain a year out there. So it's an arid climate, and cattle better be able to cover about 10 miles a day if they want to be a contender in that lifestyle and not that ranch. The people that I grew up with, it sounds secluded. Our closest neighbor was probably 16 miles to the southeast of us. And yet on that ranch, the going and coming was almost nonstop. The people that lived on these other ranches lived by the same code, the same culture that we did. And I thought it was a great beginning. I learned a lot of work ethic that I have came from that. The principle and character of the people out there, I think, that I inherited did a lot for me. I can remember very clearly, Bob, I went to North Elementary School over here, and starting school was tough because I just hadn't been off the ranch very many times in my life when I started school. But I distinctly remember the first time I ever remember seeing somebody actually tell something that knowingly wasn't true. So that speaks to the culture and the kind of people that I was raised by. And I think those values have stayed with me, and I think that they served me well in a lot of respect. Played football with Randy Raymond. As a matter of fact, we had a good football team. When I was ready to go to college, I got a football scholarship to college. Went off and majored in animal science. Really fell in love with bucking horses and playing football. So the animal science deal kind of waned in a lot of respects. Was married in 1976 to Theone Cobe. Her dad had Black Hill Aviation here, fire retardant business. Theone and I lived and worked a ranch up in Colorado for several years. Came back, went to work for Arnold, got a pilot's license, got an A&P license, worked for him for several years. My son was born in 1982, and that's a dangerous business. Firefighting in an airplane is a dangerous business. It started me to start looking for other things to do. One of the things that I remember, I'll never forget, Bob, I received a call from the president of the bank at First National Bank, and scared me absolutely to death. My wife worked in the bank. She did all of the banking. I couldn't fill out a deposit slip. And the guy called me and wanted to know if I would come in and visit with him. It scared me to death. I thought that we were in an overdraft or that we were late on a loan payment. She reminded me that we didn't do business with First National Bank. First National Bank offered me a job and said they were looking for a local guy that they could teach banking. And it was a great offer. And I never forget asking the president of the bank when he was all through, I said, would I be required to wear a suit and tie? And he said, yes, sir, that's customary dress. And I thanked him profusely for the opportunity and reminded him that a suit and tie wasn't for me. I didn't even own a necktie. Went back, spent one more year flying with Black Hills Aviation. After several incidents, I decided that maybe wearing a necktie wasn't the worst thing could ever happen to you. Came back, asked if the job was still available. Never intended to be in that business more than about a year. Ended up spending 36 years in the banking business before that was all over. At the same time, started a foundation called the Paragon Foundation. It was a legal foundation that provided money and attorneys for cases that had to do with constitutional issues, property rights issues. I think that started it with Bob Jones and Charlie Lee, two local guys here in this community. Had we ever had any inkling of where that was going to go, we probably would never have had the guts to have started it, but ended up handling litigation all over the United States, mostly west of the Mississippi. Took 3 cases before the United States Supreme Court, prevailed in the last 2, and a great experience. In the middle of that, we started a nationally publicized magazine, the Cowboy Way. Many of the viewers may have seen that. We sold it in Walmart's, Hastings, Barnes and Noble, and Tractor Supply, and those kind of places. When the Supreme Court makeup changed, it cost about $6.3 to $6.5 million to carry a case to the United States Supreme Court. When the dynamics of that court changed, we decided to back off on that and wait till we had a clearer vision of what the Chief Justice and the United States Supreme Court was going to look like. You're going to raise $6.5 million. The last thing you want to go in there to the Supreme Court and lose one of those cases, because that sets a precedent. In the meantime, did various other things, and ended up agreeing to come down here to the Chamber of Commerce for 4 months, and still here. And that's where we are right now.
And I believe you have a daughter also.
I have a son and a daughter. My son is GB Oliver the fourth. We learn to spell something, we stay with it. And my daughter is Summer Quinn Boyd, married to a great guy over in Lovington. They put together several ranches. My son has put together several ranches up in the northern part of the state, have 5 grandchildren, phenomenal. Theon and I talk often about how fortunate we were to have a family like that. It wasn't that we knew anything more about raising children than anybody else, but our children turned out wonderful. They have wonderful spouses. And I'll just tell you right on the front end that the grandchildren are the best I've ever seen in my life. I don't think anybody's grandchildren can compare with mine.
GB, tell me, growing up and maybe even into adulthood, who were your mentors or who inspired you and why?
I was surrounded. We lived out there on the ranch. My grandparents lived there, of course, with our folks. Everybody around us, I think, lived by a certain code. Randy and I are big on writing for the brand. Well, all of that comes from a code that comes from that rural lifestyle. And I just don't think anybody ever had better guidance or better role models than we did. The work would be considered in today's world as extreme. You started well before daylight. You never pulled your chair up under a table until everything on that ranch was taken care of. Every horse and every cow was fed and everything was done. That was just the way it did. The thought of ever quitting a job before it was completed was something nobody ever considered. We were taught that you had the ultimate respect for a woman. Nobody would abuse a woman. And if you made that mistake, probably everybody that knew anything about it would whip you before it was all over with. Those are the kind of things that I go back to that are so meaningful to me. You had Bob Flott on this program, and he was talking about, I believe, coming out of Michigan and being raised on a farm. And so much of that I identified with. Where I came from, if your neighbor fell on hard times or had an accident, you dropped whatever you had and you went over there to help them. And probably when you got to their ranch or you got to their house, it was probably hard to find a place to even park. But those are the customs and culture that we were raised with. And those are the things that mean so very much to me and have carried me through my life. And I try to live with with those beliefs and that way of life.
GB, tell me about the importance of a person being confident, how that helps them.
It's something that I've struggled with for a long time, not in that venue where I grew up and everything, but it's something I've struggled with a lot. In that lifestyle, it can be considered dangerous in a lot of respects. A lot of times you're out in the middle of nowhere, horseback, and you learn very quickly that actions and values carry consequences. My dad was very clear with us that when I was growing up, that the one for sure thing in life was that we were all going to die. In fact, the good book is very clear about that. It's appointed unto every man to die. But his, as he was sharing with us, so that's taken care of. You don't need to worry about that. What you're in charge of and what you've got to do and you're responsible for is living. Now, granted, Bob, I'm sure there were a lot of times that he regretted giving me that information because everything I ever did in my life, it was to the extreme measure. But I took that to heart. And one of the things that I think is probably one of the most tragic things in life is, and I see it in a lot of people I'm around, and I'm thankful that I was raised in a way that it didn't affect me, is being fearful, being afraid. Because I think, when you're afraid, you're robbed of so much of your life. We were taught that common sense, to be aware of your surroundings, but never be afraid, and to always move forward, and that living was what mattered. I remember very clearly as a young guy that we would, work those cattle. Those weren't user-friendly cattle at all. The only time they ever saw us was twice a year, and they weren't very excited about seeing us either time. We were taught to pay attention, that everything meant something. Every clue that you saw, a broken piece of glass, the direction the wind was, grass, the way the wind was blowing, when you got to a water and every track meant something, the way the cattle reacted, the way your horse reacted to the cattle. And I think that served us well because it made us acutely aware of where we were. And in that venue out there, that could be the difference in a bad wreck and coming home unscathed. And so it mattered a great deal to us. But I've used that throughout my life, banking, flying an airplane. All of those things matter, that you are acutely aware of your surroundings. The other thing that I'll share with you about me, and I haven't shared it with very many people, is the fact that I'm an introvert. And I mean an introvert way to one degree. And I had trouble starting the school. It was something that I had a difficult time doing. I have, you don't know how many times after I agreed with you yesterday to do this, how many times I cussed myself for agreeing to do this, because I have a difficult time standing up in front of people. But it's those challenges, I think, that cause you to grow. And it's the wrecks you get in that make you a full human being. The other thing that I'll share with you is when I started the school, I always felt like I was absolutely the dumbest guy in the classroom. Everybody was sharper, everybody was quicker than I was, but I learned something else, and that is that you gave me that textbook to take home that night. And I'll guarantee you, it didn't matter how many hours that I needed to spend in that book. By the time I came back to class the next morning, I'd know it as well as anybody in there. So I think we're all born with strengths and weaknesses and those kind of things. And I think the weaknesses that I had were somewhat nullified by the habits of work ethics and the kind of things we were taught in that way of life. And, you never gave up. You never backed off. If you were 7 or 8 years old out there on that ranch and you were told to stay with a bunch of cattle and bring them into water, and something happened later and they ran over the top of you, you stayed with those cattle even if they went to Grandy. It didn't matter. Giving up and leaving those cattle, if that was your job, was just unheard of. And, those are the kind of things that have stayed with me through my life and got me through what I believe are weaknesses that I have and let me survive.
GB, back to talking about fear. You told me one time, fear is the greatest imposter on this earth. What did you mean by that?
Absolutely, it is, and I'll tell you why, Bob. And I mentioned it a minute ago. Every wreck that I ever got into, every bad situation I ever got into, when it was over with, and you looked back at your life, it were the greatest learning experiences in our lives. And I think the fear of making a mistake, the fear of something going wrong, is something that we should absolutely embrace, because I think that builds who we are. If I could pass, and I guarantee you that's the way I raise my children. If there's anything I can pass on to my grandchildren, it's that very thing. Embrace the bad times that come to you, because, and I wish that it's something that I had learned earlier in life, because that's when you grow. That's when you become a bigger and better person. And so no reason to fear. And I feel like that so many people that I've met in my lifetime, you hear them talk about, well, I'm afraid of this, I'm afraid of that. And I think fear has absolutely robbed people of more life than all the pandemics that have ever come into this earth. I think you're cheated out of life when you go through fearing anything.
GB, I'm going to read a statement that I wrote down that you said to me one time. It's if you always do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. Tell me about that.
The reason I'm laughing is I'm sure these girls down there at the chamber that are watching this thing are rolling their eyes right now, because they've had to hear that so many times down here. But that's something I believe in. It's the mantra in which we run the Chamber of Commerce. It's what I use in every facet of my life. And I think if you want to be a good business person, you are always looking to improve whatever you did last time. We have a phenomenal board that came together in this Chamber of Commerce. And, we had the guts to reach out and put on that 4th of July event a couple of years ago. But we all aspire to that mindset. And so, that wasn't good enough. We're never satisfied with where we are. We're always looking to do better. We're always looking to improve. And so what came after that was the White Sands Balloon and Music Fest. Everything you do in your life, and it's repetition. There's always repetition in our lives, but never, ever approach anything that you've done in the past that you're not looking to just blow it out of the water and go bigger and better than you've ever seen before. And that's how you grow. That's how you make a business grow. That's how you make, you build yourself personally, I think, by always pushing that metal. And it makes life a lot more exciting. Find something you're passionate about and be a part of it. If you're not passionate about something, keep looking. I'm guilty of being too passionate, and there's no getting around that. But I'll guarantee you one thing: if I fall over dead before this is over with, Bob, when you look at my life, I'll guarantee you that I've done as much living as anybody else you're going to run into.
GB, you told me one time that you don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate.
I believe that, Bob. I hear, especially in our culture today, I hear people always talking about, well, you know what, I deserve that. You don't deserve anything. You don't deserve anything you didn't earn. And you find out in life that it's about selling yourself. And it's about negotiating. It's about putting yourself in the best possible situation to succeed and to excel. And so, that's kind of where I came from when I made that statement. I think it's important. People that say, well, you know what, I didn't get what I deserved. Well, I had somebody tell me one time, just close your eyes and close your hands, and then open your hand and look in your hand. And if you have what you were after, then you earned it. You deserved it. And if you don't have it, then you haven't earned it and you don't deserve it. We live in a culture where I think that's slipped away from us in a lot of respects, but that's the way life is. Those are, as our founders talked about the laws of nature and nature's God, those are the laws of nature. And I don't know where we've learned this other direction, but it's detrimental to not only the country, it's detrimental to you as an individual.
GB, one of the favorite things you said to me was that you can be sincere and still be stupid.
Guilty.
Tell me about that.
I'm intimately aware of all of that. You know, and what happens sometimes to us is we believe with all our heart that this is the way things are. And we tend to run in little groups of people that agree with us. You know, the successful business people, and you've had so many of them on this program. I think that the program you put together here is just exceptional. But you had so many of those kinds of people on this program that it's painted a very clear picture of what a great, successful business people do. But you can be absolutely committed to something and be wrong. And so in business or in life, if you're not continually educating yourself and you don't listen to other points of view and you become steadfast in what you know is absolutely correct, you're going to hit the guardrail. There's no two ways about that. And I've been guilty of that in any number of my times in my life, and I still am. I catch myself in those ruts. Never fall into a rut. Always keep your mind open. Always listen. Always read, and continue to improve yourself, and you'll be a much happier, more successful person.
GB, you told me that people don't care what you know until they know how much you care.
My Lord, I don't remember telling you all of this stuff. That goes back.
Why is that important to people know how much you care?
I just think it is. I think passion, passion has always kind of been the fuel that the fuel that fueled my engine. And I think when you genuinely care, and that is in business, or if you're running a bank or whatever it is, if you genuinely care about those people and the people that come in to see you, it'll make most of you much more successful. We were taught out there on that ranch that there was no place for bragging or big talk. It's all about results. And I've lived with that all my life. I don't care how hard somebody tried or how much time they put into it. It's all about results. And caring about people and caring about the people you do business with will make you far more successful. People don't care what you know. What they care about is that you genuinely care about their situation, and you're better than you in the way that you're handling this. You're there to improve the quality of their lives. And if you can adopt that philosophy, there's almost no place you can't go and almost nobody you can't do business with.
One thing you had written down here, GB, that I had not heard before, it says that it's not the things we don't know in life that get us into trouble. Rather, it's the things that we do know that just ain't so.
That's exactly right. In my little country bumpkin way, that's the way I look at things. Most of that comes from self-experience. I have made, when we started the Paragon Foundation, let me go back to that. We thought that we thought we had the answers. We thought, we really understood the Constitution. We understood the rights that people have. We understood the value of property and those kind of things. Hired our stout-hearted lawyers. I went out and traveled all over the United States and raised money and spoke everywhere in the world because we had a passion about what we were trying to do. And after all of that, when you look back on the first few years of the foundation's existence, I think we won 4% of the cases that we fought. Anybody that thinks that that education in the legal arena isn't expensive, let me show you the expenditures that we put in there. So you can just absolutely know you're right, and you could be right to a certain extent. But if you don't understand how to plead cases, if you don't understand the proper courts of jurisdiction, if you don't understand all of those things, you're not going to be successful. And you go in believing that absolutely you know where you are, and it turns out after millions of dollars later, you really didn't know where you were. It just ain't so. And so it goes back to what we talked about earlier. Keep an open mind, continue to educate yourself, continue to reach out to people that are more knowledgeable to you. Spend all the time you can with experts, and it'll turn it around. It certainly turned it around for that Paragon Foundation. You know, the last few years that we were active in that business and everything, as I said, the last two cases before the Supreme Court, we prevailed. And but the things we believed going in just weren't true.
GB, you once told me without truth, there can be no freedom, and that pertains to our country and our personal lives.
It absolutely does. You know, and I don't want to drag you off down a rabbit trail, but one of the things that was pounded in us as we grew up in the environment we grew up in, the most valuable thing you had in this world was your word. And as we got more involved in the legal aspects of the Paragon Foundation, I found that fascinating that if you go back and you read the correspondence between Jefferson and Madison and Adams and Henry and those kind of people, how they talked about truth. And one of the things I'll share with you is that in the dialogue that they had, they were very clear that truth and liberty were one and the same, that those two words were interchangeable in their minds. And without truth, there could be no liberty. And I think that applies to us personally as well. Any country that has lost touch with freedom, and those founders of this country were students of history. In fact, they believe that to be the most important discipline in their lives. The one thing they understood that every country in the world, in the history of the world, from the Athenian democracy to the Roman Empire right up to the Declaration of Independence, every country that had ever ignored those principles ultimately had sold their children into servitude. And I think it applies to us as well. There's a heck of a burden comes from not telling the truth. And I think that the truth is liberating. And I forget where I'm going now, but I'll tell you another little story that has brought me a great deal of help in my life. And it kind of happened by accident. I was invited by a police detective one time to attend a seminar with a guy, and I believe his name was Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee was a guy that was hired to come in and help select juries in jury trials. He taught investigators how to interrogate people that had been arrested, and how to then go back and view those videos to determine when they were telling the truth and when they were lying. And I became infatuated with that. And what I learned is, Bob, it's absolutely impossible to physically lie. Now, you can verbally lie to somebody, but physically you cannot lie. And you can't imagine how much I utilized that in the banking business. And all the years I was sitting there, I was sitting at a desk. Our clients were coming in, they were sitting in exactly the same chairs and those kind of things. But it is fascinating. You cannot physically lie. If I'm going to tell you a lie, my body will give that away in various ways. And the more that you practice, the more that you studied it, the more you learned. And I'll give you the perfect example that he used in some of his classes. The interview that Ken Starr had with President Clinton over the Monica Lewinsky affair. As you watch that, and he went through the various times as when the president was dishonest, when the president made up things, as opposed to when the president looked into the memory side of his brain and to remember facts and those kind of things. It was fascinating. But I've used that all through my life. But I always found it fascinating that it is impossible, and I will tell all of the people watching this thing, it is absolutely impossible to physically lie. Your body will always give that away. So I don't think we were meant to lie. I think it's liberating to tell the truth. And I don't care how bad the situation is, and how hard you have to reach down inside to find that truth. It's always important you do that. It was something that was pounded in us when we were children. I think those kind of values just give you a more successful and a happier life.
GB, I'd like to have some of your thoughts about socialism. We hear about that a lot these days.
Well, Bob, I'm open to it. You, if you get tired of hearing people talk bad about the government, you get tired of people jerking down statues. Well, then go live in a socialist country because they don't have those problems down there. Go to Venezuela and try to pull that off. Yeah, the government down there will exterminate you because you don't have that freedom to express your opinion and those kind of things. So if that works for you, if that works for AOC, hit the trail. I think I hear the same thing you're talking about socialism, and we ought to open our minds to socialism. Socialism has never worked in the history of the world. It has always been an abject failure. If you like socialism, and AOC seems to think that's where you go visit and stay in one of those countries. But you need to hurry because none of them ever last very long. If it's so great in these socialistic countries, we had these giant caravans coming out last summer, coming up from Venezuela and everything. A lot of people thought that those people were actually trying to find a better life in the United States. The news media will tell you that they were each carrying a personal invitation for each one of us, and the president screwed that up when he didn't let them in. But they were just inviting us to come down and enjoy all the phenomenal things in Venezuela. In the history of the world, they have never worked. They are just the next step towards communism and a dictatorship. History makes that clear. One of the things that we have committed to do in this country is rob our children, I think, and our grandchildren of history. We don't share with them the facts. But if you go back and you read the correspondence, as I mentioned earlier, about the founders of this country and how much they studied that, and they had looked at every form of government since the beginning of time. And they talked of socialism. They didn't call it socialism, but they talked of that form of government. They just don't last. It's a gimmick where somebody else can take absolute and total control over your life. If you're okay with somebody else making all the decisions, if you're okay with being told what to say or do, if you completely decide in your life that you don't want to advance and grow and become something bigger than you are, then socialism, I think, works for you. By all means, buy a ticket and go to Venezuela or Cuba or one of those places.
GB, tell me about any formal business training that you've had and what that consisted of. I'm assuming you had to go to some schools to work in a bank.
Yeah, the best, and many of the people you've had on this program, I'm always hesitant to get into business because I think they're, or my philosophy on business, because I think they're so much more successful and so much better to listen to. But yeah, I went to every banking school in the world, ended up with a master's degree in banking from Chestnut. I guess what they finally learned was it didn't matter how many banking schools you sent me to, you're never going to make a banker out of me. But I think experience, you can get all of that out of the book, and it's somewhat helpful. But there's nothing quite like sitting across the desk day after day after day from business people and looking back and seeing what makes those people successful, what causes failures in those businesses. That's the best teacher. And those are things that I have taken with me from the banking business and the various businesses that Fiona and I have been involved in. And they're a great learning tool. That face-to-face contact with successful business people. And that's what I love about this Chamber of Commerce and sitting on this board. This is the strongest board that I think exists anywhere else. And what it's made up of is great, prudent business people. And quite frankly, with CB19, it was the decisions that were made within this organization immediately when this came down, and they were prudent business decisions made by by the executive board of this Chamber of Commerce, which are phenomenal business people, that I think saved this organization. Had we not made those decisions right on the front end, this chamber would be in trouble. But from a banking standpoint, I think it's a great learning tool. I've always looked at accountants and thought that they, much like bankers, have access to phenomenal information. They get to look at those numbers. They get to see the decisions that are made by prudent business people, and the great learning tool.
GB, how important is it to have a good accountant and a good attorney, both?
Let me tell you, being a guy that's paid attorneys probably in excess of $12 or $14 million, I can tell you a great deal about attorneys, and I can tell you what I look for in an attorney and how valuable an attorney can be, and how detrimental an attorney that's not engaged and not educated in the type of law that you're playing, how devastating that can be. In the banking world, information, you're making decisions based on face-to-face contact and your gut feelings with those people, and then the numbers. You don't have good numbers. You could love that client to no end and want, and with everything in your heart, to help them and keep them in business. But if the numbers don't work, it's not going to add up, and you're not going to be able to make the loan. And it's interesting because in the banking world, you see financials coming from lots of different accountants, lots of different bookkeepers, and you begin to learn very quickly that some of that information you can trust, and some of it you need to be afraid of. And it doesn't take very long to figure out who the astute accountants and bookkeepers are in this community. And what you'll also find is that your astute business people, your successful business people, will gravitate towards certain companies. And so you have a new client come in, and you say, I need financial statements, I need income statements, I need tax returns, the whole litany of things that a banker has to make a decision. And you can't wait a lot of times to look and see who filled out their tax return, because in a lot of ways, Bob, that's going to tell you a lot about the client over there before you ever have the face-to-face meeting. And let me share some other things with you, if you don't mind, about banking that I think is important. I'm not a banker now, so I feel free to just spill my guts here. As a business or a new business, and you're going in and you're looking to develop a relationship with a bank, I always told people to look at that bank and look at that banker the same way you would look at creating or taking in a partner, because I'll guarantee you, once you get in that relationship with that bank, you indeed have a partner, and you better judge that banker with the same scrutiny that you would taking a new partner in your business. And spent 35, 36 years in that business. And I can tell you that I've heard people say, well, bankers don't have any sense. Well, they're some of the most intelligent people I've ever seen. They have a lot of attributes that, a lot better attributes in a lot of cases than I have. But I'll tell you this much, and you better look for a banker that has a little bit of a courage. And that's the big hole I saw in the banking industry. Worked for 3 different banks, and that's what I see. That guy is taking your future, your family's future, your business in there, and you better know that, as we all know in business, that you have highs and lows. Things are really good for a period of time, and then you're going to hit situations where it's sad. And that banker better care about you as much as you care about your business. Because over and over again, I've seen bankers that hold your entire future in their hand, walk into a loan committee meeting or walk into a board meeting, and actually sell you down the river the minute one of their superiors may ask a question about your loan packet, back out and sell you down the river, and then sit down with the client or sit down with your customer and say, board just They just, I tried, but they're just not going to make that loan. So really scrutinize who you get into business with, and that includes your banker, and because that's your lifeline, and you better know that that son of a gun is not only going to be with you in the good times, but that rascal is going to sit down and try to find a way with you, because there's always nearly a way out of anything, and is he going to ride with you through the rough times? And that's a key, and that's a suggestion I'd make to young business people that are searching out a bank. Um, it is your lifeline. They do control your destiny. It's in their hands, and it matters. The other thing I will tell you that nothing will turn me off quicker, or any banker, is the minute that I catch you telling me something that's not exactly accurate. Now you've destroyed the entire relationship. But I've had customers that I loaned money to, and things were good, and then all of a sudden things go south in business, and it's going to happen from time to time. And I always appreciated the fact that I didn't have to go run them down. I didn't have to find them. The banker in a little community like this, he knows every alley cat that crosses the street at night. There are no surprises to him. But don't make that banker have to come find you. You be sitting there front and center when that bank opens, and you walk in and you spill your guts and you tell him, I got problems. I'm concerned about it. I hope you'll stay with me. I hope you'll work with me. I hope you'll find a way through this thing. But we've got problems, and I'm telling you, I'm here to stick with it. I'm not going to run file bankruptcy. I'm going to ride with you just as long as you'll ride with me. Nothing makes a banker feel better than that. Because I can tell you, in every loan that's in the portfolio, somebody's got to be worrying about it. And if the borrower's not worried about it, I guarantee you, then I got to be worried about it. So those are just little things that I learned in the banking business that keep in mind as you're dealing with a banker and you're developing those relationships. Look at it from their side of the thing, put yourself in their position, and then find one that's got some courage and guts to stay with you, even when the times aren't great.
Okay, GB, I'd like to have a discussion about two different scenarios. The first one is, with all the people that you loan money to as a banker that were successful in their business, however you define success, what were the common characteristics of those people? And then after that, I would like you to tell me the common characteristics of people that weren't successful with their loan or their business.
One thing that, from a banking side of this thing, is I watched them. Those businesses were their number one priority. The people that are successful don't have a good month, open that cash register and grab out a few bucks and go to the lake. That doesn't work. That's just not the way the system works. The people that I saw were successful were continually educating themselves, continually gathering more and more information about the industry they were in. They were continually reaching out to other people, looking for a better way to do business. We know that nothing is stagnant in this life, and especially business. Business is always something that's moving, it's evolving. And so it's incumbent upon good business people, and good ones do this, to continue to educate themselves. The other thing that always impressed me about the more successful business people is the dedication they put into their business. The hours didn't matter. Didn't matter what kind of effort they had to subject. When they ran into tough times, it didn't matter if they had to stay in there 48 straight hours in that business. They never back away. The other thing that I always saw that made people successful in business, again, is going back to their character. That all bleeds through to the people that are coming to do business with you, the people that work for you. All of that matters. The banker, as I mentioned a while ago, walk in there and tell that banker something one time that is not exactly true, and see how the demeanor changes in that relationship. That guy from that point forward, or that girl, has no confidence in you. If you'll lie to me about one thing, you'll lie to me about something else. And so they have real strong character, work ethic. always looking to improve the things that the business they're in, always looking for ways to add to it, to expand it. Those are just the key. Again, you've had some of the most phenomenal business people on this program, and you're one of them, Bob. So from a banker standpoint, that's what I looked at. But if you want to know what successful business people look like and what those traits are, go back and look at these former on the venue deals. The people that I saw failed absolutely went into it not understanding business, not going out and finding the right accountant, or finding the right accountant and not taking that accountant's advice, believing that all business people were destined to be successful. And the minute they got a little money ahead, they were headed down to Port of Arthur or somewhere like that. That always never leads to a good ending. It's what makes you successful in life. It's the dedication and the commitment you make to bettering yourself every day. Business is just that.
GB, let's talk about the concept of debt. Now, you have banks that want to loan people money, and then you have people like Dave Ramsey that say, if you can't pay cash for something, you shouldn't do it. I'd like to know your thoughts on debt. And one of the things I would really be interested in is, how does a person know when they have too much debt?
You know when you have too much debt. From a personal standpoint, and my view on debt has changed, and I think it does with a lot of people, as you get older, and I'm old. As you get older, your view of debt changes. But in business, I believe that you've got to acquire debt in order to do certain things. You've got to be able to do that. It goes back to the intelligence that you surround yourself with, whether it be an attorney, an accountant, a good banker. All of those things matter. But I think it's very difficult to expand and go where you need to go in business without lines of credit and those kind of things. From an individual standpoint, I've always kind of shied away from that. I've watched a lot of Dave Ramsey stuff, and I believe that he's very correct. I don't want any personal debt if I can avoid it. And we're all going to have personal debt from time to time, but I think it's best to avoid that if at all possible. I can tell you some of the things that, from a banking standpoint, some of the things that I absolutely regret more than anything in the world. And people label bankers as stingy and those kind of things. Some of the things that I regretted more than anything in the world was loans that I made to people. You talk about how do you know when you've got too much debt? When you've loaned somebody money and you put them in a situation where they can't succeed and when they can't pay it back, and then you as a banker sit back and you watch what the things that you did have, the effects that has on their lives, their families, those kind of things. The worst sin I think that a banker can ever commit is loaning too much money to somebody. And after you've watched that as a banker a few times, it's not that we're not big-hearted. It's not that we don't want to help in every way possible. But the last thing I want to do to you is put you in a situation where I destroy your business, I destroy your family, I destroy your personal life. When you've got too much debt, and it is an ugly, ugly deal. And as a banker, it wasn't that you didn't want to help people. I just never again wanted to put people in that kind of situation.
Okay. GB, at this point in your life, would you rather have more time or more money?
Lord have mercy, Bob. I'm 89 years old. I want more time.
Would you have said that when you were 30?
No, absolutely not. I look back on that, and it was some of the best times of Theon's in my life. I had that job at the bank. I didn't think it would last. I didn't think you could make a banker out of me. And after 35 years, I'm not sure that they did. But I refused. I bought one suit, one necktie, and two white shirts. And Theon would wash one of those shirts every day, and I wore the same clothes every day. And you know, I think, as I recall, they paid me $9,000 a year. And so in the back of my truck, you know, I had all my horseshoeing equipment. And so I would go to the bank all day long, and then I would run to the restroom, change my clothes, and then go shoe horses all night to make ends meet. Some of the best times of my life, you know, and it made us what we are. You got people, young people need to embrace that, because it's how you grow. It's how you become who you are. But I'll guarantee you, back then, I'd have done anything, you know, to have had more money. But time changes a lot of things, and you know, a few days with your grandkids uh, is more than $100,000 check in value to me now.
GB, if you knew what you know now when you were 30, what would you have done differently in your life?
You know, Bob, I'm not sure that I would change anything. I wish that I knew then what I know now. I mentioned a while ago that I would embrace the setbacks, because in the end, those setbacks and those wrecks that you have, and let me assure you, I've had some of the most spectacular wrecks in the world. When you're as passionate as I am about things, even when you miss the target, you wipe out everything behind it. And but as I look back, you know, I wish that I had embraced those things, because over time you find out that those wrecks, the bad things that happened, the setbacks that you had, were the most valuable things that ever came into your life. And I hope that those are things that I can convey to my grandchildren. I always have a problem with telling somebody what to think. Nothing offends me more than somebody to tell me what to think, or for somebody to tell somebody else what to think. I have a lot of things that I'm very proud of my children. Obviously, the message that Fiona and I tried to get through to them, they took that. But those are some of the things that I would want to leave with my grandchildren. I don't want to tell them what to think, but I want to share with them some of the things I learned, in hopes that somewhere in their lives, they will look back and they'll remember that. And if it's convenient and it's handy and it's valuable, they'll incorporate those things in their lives.
Thank you for that. We just got a few minutes left. I've got maybe 2 or 3 more questions for you. I'd like to talk to you about investing and what you think about investing. And I don't mean which stock should you buy, but what kinds of things have you seen that people invest in, or in what manner do they invest that seems to be long-term successful, depending on the amount of risk they're willing to take?
Well, let's just knock out horses and cattle. Let's get that off the table right on the front end. The best investments I've ever seen, Bob, and this is what comes to mind now, was not what you did with your money, it's what you did with your time. The best investments I think you can make are in reading and studying and learning and dedicating yourself to improving yourself, improving your family life. Because those are the things that in business, I think, go on and bring far bigger returns than any kind of investment you're going to make with your money. Invest your time in yourself, invest it in the business, invest it in improving everything about you. And from what and I haven't always done that, but the people that I have watched that made those commitments, that went to seminars, that read the books, those investments paid off huge dividends in the end. As far as investments today, you know, I had this very conversation with my wife and my mom the other day. You know, I don't feel like I'm situated right now to tell anybody how to invest. The things that I had believed in the past were good investments are gone. You know, with the state of this economy, traditionally, this has an effect on gold. And if you look at the amount of gold that Russia has stockpiled over the last several years, you can see that may be one of the few things that I'm in agreement with Vladimir Putin over. You know, I look at that when there's unrest in the world, that's when gold values begin to grow. But boy, I wouldn't want anybody to take my advantage or take my advice on investing. I can tell you though that you invest in yourself. You invest in making yourself a better person, a more valuable person. That always pays off.
Okay. Next to last question. In your life, what are your greatest assets? I'm not talking about your bank account necessarily.
My family. Make no question.
Okay. So the last question is, if I were 18 years old and just graduating high school, what advice would you give me to be successful?
Some of the things that we've talked about already, Bob. Fear nothing. Embrace the wrecks that are going to come, certainly going to come. And know full well that every one of those wrecks is an investment in your future. You know, I don't believe in making mistakes more than once. I think that that's where it's shame on you. But we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to be in wrecks and those kind of things. But absolutely do not be don't be afraid to make those mistakes, and don't fear anything. It just robs you of your life when you're afraid. Some of the most remarkable people that I've met in the world share that philosophy with me. I had a dear friend down in Birmingham, Alabama, that spent a great deal of time with, and we sat and talked about these kind of things. He was a phenomenal man, had 3 doctorate degrees. I'll never forget it. We went into his office. He was a black gentleman. He took me through the Civil Rights Museum and those kind of things. Went into his office and he got a phone call, and I was walking around his office and I was looking, and Dr. Glenn, I knew was an MD, but Dr. Glenn had 2 other doctorate degrees, one in theology and one in something else. And when he got off the phone, I said, well, Dr. Glenn, you've been holding out on me, partner. And he said, well, how's that? And I said, why, you got 3 doctorates. I don't know why you would ever hang around with some country bumpkin like me. And he said, you know, GB, he said, I'm nothing but a humble servant of the Lord. And, you know, I always think about that. I always think about as I get older, that's what maybe I aspire to be. But I have been so blessed in my life with the kind of people that I've been exposed to. So many of them in this community, so many of them that are household words in a lot of your homes. And then a lot of people that were just like us, that didn't have anything. And that's a beautiful part about this country. You have no limitations. All the limitations are right between your ears. And remember that. Understand that. There's nothing that can turn you back in this country if you believe, you're unafraid, and you're not afraid to invest in yourself. I don't think I even answered your question then, did I?
Okay, it's good advice. GB, thank you so much for your time. I'm a little disappointed that you were so well behaved, but I appreciate it.
Been good to be with you, Bob.
I'm going to let you go back to the pool and the margaritas.
Going to do some parasailing.
Yep.
What an honor to be out here with you, Bob. You know, I avoided this in a lot of respects. Didn't want to. I didn't think that I really brought any value, and I don't know that I do. But I can't tell you how much we appreciate this program that you came up with, you put in and put together, and how much value this has brought people in this community. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome, and you enjoy the pool, my friend.
I will.
All right. All right. Thank you all very much. We'll see you next time.